is a visit in the clinic with Dr. Ryder kind of a one-time event, or can there be return visits? And also, would Dr. Ryder work with the local rheumatologist?
So we have different scenarios. We have some people that come to GW, and then it is a one-time thing that we work with their doctor at home, and everything goes well for them after that, and we never see them again. We've had a number of patients who come back repeatedly to GW. We've had some that we really suggest to the patient and the doctor that we'd like to see them back, because we'd like to be following along with them a little more closely and really be sure the child comes out of the woods, if you will, and really is getting better and on the right treatments. And then we've had other people that come and then they go away for several years, and then all of a sudden things aren't going so well again and they're back. Or we have people that come and things are going well, and then they're trying to work with us to figure out about how to come down off their treatment. So we've had all kinds of scenarios. So we definitely are constantly partnering with the doctors at home and trying to work with them and continue to have a relationship.
I just want to add, one thing, which is that concept of collaboration is universal. So it's really, really important for kids with JM to have a local rheumatologist that families can count on as the person where really the buck stops with them, actually. They're the ones ordering medications and infusions, monitoring closely for side effects because we're far away. But also, the ethos of all of the centers is of service to, obviously, children and families, but service to the larger community. And so we definitely don't want to be taking over or anything like that. We're here to be a team. Yeah.
Well, we in GW have sent letters nationwide to pediatric rheumatologists to let them know about the existence of the center. Of course, we can't do it every year, but we also attend national rheumatology conferences, adult rheumatology conferences, and pediatric. And I also I'll tell you that I have a number of referrals come through the NIH to GW. So there are people that call me at the NIH asking about the studies at the NIH, and then after we talk with them on the phone, it turns out that they're not a good fit for that study. Or any of our studies at the NIH, and I say, well, if you'd like to be seen, we could see you at GW, and that's how they come be at GW. So ideally, we would have more calls and more reach out, but we actually do quite a bit of that, and we look to the foundation too to try to advertise too.
Yeah, I'll just add one thing. I've been really struck by how actually the families themselves spread the word. I think both probably more effectively than any of us. And I think actually it counts for more than we should put out the word. I don't deny that. But it really means something else when families, particularly I've noticed, it sounds like on social media and stuff, families are connecting a lot. I don't go on any of those pages because to me that's hallowed ground for the families only, but this is what I'm hearing. And it's good in two ways. One is that when one family needs help and another says, we received it here and it's worth it, right? There's the inherent trust. But second, then when a family approaches their local doctor and says, yeah, I'm hearing that there's a really good service available, nearby or not so nearby, that doctor can, if they haven't heard of us, then can, kind of look it up and see that maybe we have something to offer.
At Duke, I know we've already started outreach in the Carolinas, so we start a little bit more locally, and that's already been pretty fruitful for us, but I'll say on more of a national scale, I really think the majority of our patients find us through either Cure JM or Dr. Reed's been doing this for so long that a lot of people just know her. And it's just like Dr. Ryder, Dr. Pachman, Dr. Ardalan. Even when I was a fellow starting out, you go to one or two meetings, and by then you know who they are and what they do because it's a very small world. It's growing actually pretty quickly. It's a lot bigger now than when I started, but people know each other and they know what they do pretty quickly. So I think most people know how to find the expertise. The other thing is we as rheumatologists have this this mailing list, this listserv, and we can post questions like that. There are questions on there all the time. I'm sending my patient to Croatia. Is there a pediatric rheumatologist there? If so, how do I put them in touch? And so, rheumatologists have the ability also to reach out to us. So I think those are some of the ways we make those connections.
So the question is, if somebody was coming to one of the centers for advice, what is the best preparation for the family to do ahead? I think you heard from James and our other patient that it's hard to come for the visit and meet all these strange doctors that you don't know, and that's a scary situation, and it's a long visit, and I think just mentally preparing for that. I think that really already getting with your home doctor to really figure out what are some of the key questions and what do you really hope to get out of the visit, and just putting all of your heads together and really thinking that through carefully. Of course, you heard from Michelle about the importance of sending all those records ahead of time and us having adequate time to read and study them so we could ask you the best questions too. And I think also thinking about some of the hard things, what's been difficult and what you're trying to improve upon. Why did you really come? Really expressing that. And then just having any questions prepared that, you haven't been able to get answered at home that you really want to spend a few extra minutes at the end to talk about.
I totally agree. And maybe bring snacks. Bring, they are really long. What's that? Oh, yeah, I could use a few Oreos. But seriously, it is a long day. We don't mean for it to be, but there's a lot of work to be done. And if we're going to make good use of your time, it will just take time, right? This is not like cookie cutter medicine. And then I think definitely it's really good to give your local doctor a heads up before coming over, as Dr. Ryder was saying. I've only once had a situation where, there was not quite as much notification as maybe there should have been. And so that created disjointedness, right? Now 2 doctors are involved, but one hand doesn't know what the other is doing. That's actually a safety issue. So, I think notification and communication and transparency is really important. And then the other thing is it's approaching it with curiosity, because you don't know what advice you're going to get. Chances are, if you ask 2 or 3 different pediatric rheumatologists what they would do in a situation, you may get 2 or 3 different recommendations. There's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And that's actually okay. Each of us has perspective that's unique and experiences that are unique. So I say this just because I'm recalling one time where it seemed like maybe the preferences were very firmly set in advance. And so that's hard as a doctor, because it's maybe there are other approaches actually. That one could work, but maybe there are a few different ways to kind of approach this.
I think the only thing that I'll add on to that is I usually encourage patients and their families to take advantage of that long car ride or plane ride when they have to come to a center of excellence, because usually, phones and whatnot aside, it's actually one of those few places where you can have fewer distractions and you can have a good conversation with your child about what they want, what's really bothering them. Because I think parents are usually often insightful, but every once in a while, we all get surprised by what somebody says. And then once you come across something that's important to talk about, write it down, because these visits things move fast. And there's always going to be something that's probably a little bit outside of what you expected. And those things throw us off, and it makes it really, really hard to remember what all you wanted to talk about. And so I usually tell people, write it down on your phone or whatever and bring the list with you, so you make sure you get time to hit on those important things. And then I would encourage the parents to think about the same questions for themselves. Again, so that they get their needs addressed, the child gets their needs addressed. And then I think early on in the visits, the other thing that's helpful is I usually ask patients what they want to talk about early on, so I can try and adjust the visit. And everybody, I think, at our center does that too. And I I mean, these guys are great rheumatologists, so I have no doubt they do too. But that way we can adjust how much time we spend asking our questions compared to theirs. And then if there's something that's really anxiety provoking for you, I would just call it out and let people know in advance, because sometimes if we can address those things really, really early on, it helps you and us be more present in the rest of the visit, because it's hard to get past things that we're worrying about. And you can have a discussion about something else and spend 10 minutes on it and forget the discussion once you move on to the more anxious topic. And I think getting those things out of the way early on, so prioritizing the list, I think that helps too.
Just want to say one thing right off the bat, which is in some fields in pediatrics, there's a real culture of research. So, for example, in pediatric oncology, that's a field where the principle really in that field is every child, when they first receive their diagnosis, should be eligible, if possible, for some kind of study that they can be on, and that there should be a wide enough range of research studies available for that to be possible. That doesn't always mean starting with some new, medication that hasn't yet got a lot of data behind it. It can mean what are called observational studies, which are studies that are about gathering information and seeing over the long haul if you can identify which kids do well and which kids have more struggles and what are the factors that distinguish them, or help you identify who might be responsive to one treatment or another. And then there are some treatment trials as well, and I'll hand it over to Dr. Ryder for more on that. So I just want to kind of give a sense that research doesn't always mean just new medications or new treatments. It can mean quite a few different things simultaneously.
Yeah, so this is about when is the right time to be involved in research. Should it be shortly after diagnosis or later on when things aren't going well? And there is a lot of research being done. What would be the right thing to do? And there are a lot of options. We're lucky that we have the support of CureJM, and we have NIH studies too, to be doing all this research and learning more. And we're always grateful for families that are interested to contribute to that greater source of knowledge, because that's how we can move things forward, learn more about the disease, and develop these new treatments over time. But what's right is up to you and your family and the child. What's the right timing? Some people are ready to participate right from the beginning, and some people really need time to adjust to their diagnosis and get started on the right treatments and then contribute later, And there's so many ways to contribute, as Dr. Ardalan said, from small questionnaire studies that you could do online from your home to, doing things in the clinic setting while your child is being seen for this consultation appointment. There could be questionnaires or just the review of your records while you're, as part of that visit that are looked at, or there could be an extra blood test. Or at the NIH, sometimes we have people coming for 2 or 3 days, and they're not always for treatment studies. They're often for studies to learn more about the causes of the disease, or to see in more detail about better ways to assess the disease, and new imaging studies and new ways of looking at things. So there's so many different opportunities, and we're very grateful for families, and it's just what's right for you, family, and when.
I totally agree with all that. I think the one other thing that I would do if I were in your shoes, just having this meeting available, is talk to other families about it too, because I can tell you I have a chronic disease. I have an identical twin brother. I would have been a perfect research patient or whatever for that growing up. But my parents told me they absolutely didn't want me being involved in that. And part of it was I had a rare disease, and so there was always that entourage of doctors, trainees, whoever could fit in the room. And I think my mom wanted to limit my experience with that. And actually, in retrospect, that was one of the things that I personally wish I could have been involved in. But I think there's also this perception of that research is kind of what happens in the movies, and that's really not what research is anymore. I don't think it's really a lot of paperwork, just like the rest of life. And I think going out and understanding really what that means is really helpful in making those decisions. I will tell you that for certain research questions, it's far better to be able to get the paperwork up front and get biospecimens like blood up front, because things change once we start treatment. But that being said, the real final decision comes down to what are you comfortable with and ready for in your child too. We always try and bring the child into that decision. There's this concept of assent in studies, so they can't consent until they're 18, but they can say yes or no even from a pretty early age, because they usually kind of get some pieces of it at a high enough level where even usually 7 or 8 year olds, where we ask them if they want to be involved. And if there's a question, then don't go home and talk about it, or do it at another time. It's not wrong to not be involved. But if it's something, I would encourage the conversation. If you don't know, keep the conversation going and think about it and get some perspectives and more information to make an informed decision. Because the easy answer is no, but I think sometimes there will be some people, I've had other patients that have come up to me later on and said, I wish I would have been involved in research now that I know what it is. And I think there are other people that are very happy that they weren't. I mean, that's just not what they're interested in or what they're hoping for. But at the end of the day, that should never be, that will never interfere with what happens as far as treatment goes and diagnosis and that relationship with your physician. And I think if you feel at some point that it does, then you should start asking yourself if that's also the right relationship with your physician, because there's nothing more important than that treatment relationship that you have. Nothing should interfere with that.
If you have a question about a study, bring it up with your doctor. Like, definitely, I can think of one family who very perceptively, they knew about the abatacept study that Dr. Ryder is doing, and their daughter was flaring, and they said, would this be a good idea? I said, that's actually really worth looking into. And so I reached out, and ultimately, she didn't qualify, which that's okay. At least we had that conversation and could see if that's an option. So anytime you're wondering, just bring it up, and it's worth addressing.
I'll just add on to that. On our website, there's information about research and study opportunities. Sorry. On the Cure JM website, there's information about various studies that might be appropriate for your JMer. I think we have time for one last question, if anyone is interested. Oh, good.
Along the same lines, clinicaltrials.gov is another source of research studies throughout the country. But also that research, sometimes it's a very long process. The progress can be slow, and you might not realize that you're contributing to a greater knowledge as part of that. You might not see the benefit of participation, but realize that you are contributing.
What other questions? I think you said time for one more, right? All right. Thank you, guys.